Good morning, everyone. We are going to wrap up Samson real quick here in Judges and then move on to Micah and the Levite. So we've gone through Samson's story. We've seen him fall, I want to say victim to Delilah, but he's pretty much a victim of himself, really, in that Delilah has pushed him to try to get him to reveal the source of his strength, and he has finally told her. Of course, she betrays him. She's been offered a lot of money to do so, and they cut off his hair. They're able to capture him, and he is now a prisoner of the Philistines. So she's been paid, she's happy, and he has lost his power as soon as they have cut off his hair. This is kind of the last straw, the last thing that Samson was holding on to. You know, rather than seeing a progression of growth in Samson, we're seeing him decline, really. He's not getting closer to God as time goes on. He is giving up more and more of his identity and more of any shred of service to God. And so the Philistines are able to seize him. They gouge out his eyes, and they have him bound in bronze shackles, and he's there doing hard labor, grinding at the mill of the prison. But we do see a little something shining through. It says the hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Now, of course, there's nothing like inherent about the hair that is going to give him strength again, but that is a bit of foreshadowing that something is going to happen. And though Samson is going to die, he's not going to just die. So, question number 10 is explain the end of Samson's life. What are the circumstances surrounding his death? Okay, no?
Well, the Philistines are getting together in a big festival to worship their idol.
Yes.
And they bring Samson out to entertain them.
Yes.
And when he's finished, he asks the young man that's taking him around, to put him between the two pillars that are holding up the roof, and they puts him there, and he prays to God to give him the strength to destroy these people, and he pushes the pillars apart, and the roof falls in, and he kills more people in his death than he's ever killed in his whole lifetime, and plus he dies himself.
Yeah. Okay, so very good. We've got Samson out on display to entertain the Philistines as he is as they're having their whole celebration of Dagon there. And that's exactly what happens. That in his last few moments, as he has been very dishonored, he's blind and unable to do anything to defend himself. You know, he asks to be able to feel the pillars, kind of maybe to get his balance or something, or being a little overwhelmed. And with his hands on the pillars, he calls upon God to give him strength. Now, I want to note kind of what this prayer is. If we read it, verse 28, then Samson called to the Lord and said, O Lord God, please remember me, and please strengthen me only this once, O God, that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And then he grasps those 2 pillars and says after that, let me die with the Philistines. What do you think about that prayer? Dave?
Well, if you think about it, it's kind of a request for suicide.
Yeah.
But not like we would think.
Right.
We would think normal. That's not right. It's not the typical type of suicide.
Sure.
I think that, this is only my thought, but I think that he's ashamed and he's saddened by the things that he allowed transpire.
Mm-hmm.
And now he realizes that God gave him that strength and all of the things, and now he's putting it in, he's requesting to put it into it, including himself. It's like he can't, it's like he doesn't want to suffer through it anymore. I don't know, I'm just trying to put my head in his head.
Yeah.
I mean, because he could have easily pulled down the pillars and kept walking. You know?
Right.
So I don't know, I mean, that's what I.
Yeah. So there is some desperation there. He's not trying to preserve his own life anymore. He's not asking to be able to break the chains that he's in, the bronze fetters that he's in. I guess they wouldn't be this way if he's able to hold the pillars. But he's not asking for that. He's not asking to be able to walk away from there. He's asking to die and to kill a bunch of people as he goes. What else about this prayer jumps out to you, Lauren?
The word vengeance kind of pops out to me. It's not really a prayer for repentance per se. It's more what's on his mind and he uses.
Yeah, that's the read I get on this too. That it's still more about vengeance than it is like this great moment that he finally has trusted in God. He is asking God for help, and it's hard to read exactly what might be going on in his heart as he's doing so. But note that he's not asking for God's name to be glorified, or for their idol worship to be stopped, or for the enemies of God's people to be destroyed, or anything like that. He's asking to be avenged for his two eyes. And that's not exactly this like big titan of faith act that he could make. It's hard for me to see Samson as making a complete turnaround here.
Well, that's where, respectfully, I don't agree with that. I mean, part of it I do.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was in there, but he asked the Lord to deliver him. He said, "You have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant." And he's attributing that to God, not to himself, not vengeance from himself, saying that God's going to deliver everything. And God's still with him in that too, which is also significant.
Right, because the Spirit of the Lord had left him and does seem to come back here. So there is something, but Samson is, at the very least, this is complicated for him. Because this is not a noble end for Samson at all. He is victorious over the Philistines, kind of, but he is dying himself as well. He's not getting a great victory that he's able to walk away from. And he's not even exactly dying as an honorable martyr on the field of battle kind of thing either. He's dying out of this desperate act that he's making. Mark?
Yeah, this whole thing was for an idol. It was for Dagon. And I think what everybody's saying is there's this absence of being appalled of idolatry. And this is, I think, what you've been talking about and what Grant is trying to lead everybody to see in this part of the book is how far it's come for Israel in general. He should be appalled at Dagon. He should be calling God to destroy this Dagon. But instead he says, save my eyes.
Yeah. It would be a mistake for us to try to oversimplify any one person and say that anyone is all good or all bad. I don't believe that Samson is all bad and has zero faith in God whatsoever. He is mentioned in Hebrews 11, though we talked some about that last week, that, some of the explanations for why that might be. That being said, this is a lot different than some of the other judges we've seen in this book. And that's not an accident. This is not Othniel. This is not Ehud. This is not even Shamgar. This is a lot more like Jephthah, but even worse. A lot more like Gideon, but even worse. And this is supposed to help us see that things have fallen really far in Israel. They're not appalled by idol worship. And when we get into Micah and the Levite, we will see exactly how not appalled they are. They're accepting idol worship. Samson is not outraged that they're worshiping Dagon here. Whatever he is asking God, however much faith he has in God, there is no outrage that this is the worship of an idol. So Samson has realized something. In the previous prayer, he does credit God to some degree. And in this prayer, he is asking God for help, and that is better than some of what Samson did before. But he is not exactly a paragon of virtue and righteousness and faith in any of this. He is an extremely imperfect person who is representing the fallen state of Israel. So he is successful in doing this. As was mentioned, he pushes down these pillars, he dies in it, and he kills more people in that one event than he killed in every day of his life prior to this, which, if you remember the rampages that we talked about with Samson, that is a pretty impressive feat. And then it says that his brothers and his family came down, took him, brought him up, and buried him in the tomb of his father. And then, almost a little ironically, he had judged Israel 20 years. And again, we got to take that broader definition of judge with deliverance, with being the warrior and the fighter against Israel's enemies. But even still, doesn't this hit differently than it did at the beginning of the book of Judges? That he had judged Israel 20 years, but what did he actually accomplish? He never led Israel into battle. He debatably never faithfully called upon God, at least so-so on that. If he did a couple times, then that was the exception. And he did not completely deliver Israel from the Philistines. The deliverance is not complete here. The Philistines do not go away. They are not beaten back. In all of these other cases, we saw how Israel had rest from their enemies. They don't have rest from the Philistines. Not yet. They will later, but it's not going to be until David is coming and fighting the Philistines, but they get real deliverance from them. And there's quite a bit between now and then. So that leaves us on kind of a sour note, really. Samson has some good things about him, but mostly bad things, and that launches us perfectly into the double conclusion of the book. Anything else you wanted to mention about Samson? Yes?
Did he overlap with Samuel a little bit?
I do not remember off the top of my head. A lot of the judges did overlap, but I can't remember how the timeline works out on that. Okay, so you may remember from a long, long time ago when we started Judges, that we said there's a double introduction and a double conclusion to the book on either side of the main Judges cycle that we're going through. So for quite some time, we've been dealing with that downward cycle of how the Judges are coming to deliver Israel and all the things surrounding that. We're past that now. Samson is not the last judge, but he's the last judge in the book of Judges. You can definitely include Samuel, and you can include Eli even, really. But they're not in this book. This book was never meant to describe every single person who ever delivered Israel. It's a book of judges, not a book of every judge. It's meant to tell a story, even more than the individual men and women. It's about the nation as a whole. So now we get to a double conclusion. The first part of this is a story of Micah and the Levite, and the second part of it, we will actually go backward in time some and talk about something that happened much earlier, but functions narratively as a conclusion to what's going on here. Both of these will involve Levites. Both of them are uncomfortable and troubling for us to read. So, at the beginning of the book of Judges, we saw how Israel struggled with the idols of the peoples around them. They had a hard time in staying out of paganism. Now in these 2 chapters, we're not going to see them struggling. We're going to see them wholly embracing idol worship. And the story of Micah is a big part of that. So who is Micah and what does he do? Yes.
Well, he's in the tribe of Ephraim, and he steals his mother's money.
Yeah. Okay, off to a great start here. So he's a man of Ephraim. Ephraim often kind of represents the more rebellious northern tribes that cause some trouble as Israel's history goes on. And I don't know if that's a coincidence here or not, but this is not a good look for Ephraim. And yes, he has stolen his mother's money, a lot of money, actually. You will remember that when Deborah was offered money to give up Samson, that each of the 5 kings of the Philistines said, "We'll give you 1,100 pieces of silver for that total of 5,500. This man has stolen 1,100 pieces of silver from his mother. That's a lot of money. He has stolen a fortune from her. And apparently, she wasn't real happy about that. I wonder why. But she didn't know who did it. So she had pronounced a curse upon whoever stole the money, and it seems like that bothered Micah, either because he didn't want the curse to affect him, or because he was just feeling guilty about taking the money from his mother. And so he confesses to her, "Yes, I am the one who took this money." And what's her response to that? Yeah, Gary.
Bless your heart.
Yeah, basically. I like that. Yeah, it's an interesting response. Although I think when she says, "Blessed be my son by the Lord," she may be kind of like invalidating the curse that she had uttered before. Seems to view this curse as very literal and something that's really going to affect him. And now that he has confessed that he did this, she's going to bless him instead because she is happy that he is giving the money back. But yeah, I do like that, bless your heart there as well. There may be a piece of that in there. So he gives the 1,100 pieces of silver back to his mother. And what does she do with it? Okay. Yeah, she dedicates the silver to the Lord. To the Lord, yes. And it says specifically, this isn't just any god, and that's going to be important because we're going to deal with some other gods in this story. But with Yahweh, specifically, using Yahweh's name, she dedicates the silver to Yahweh. From her hand to her son, she's giving part of it back to him in order to make this image, to make an idol. So 200 pieces of silver go to a silversmith, making a carved image and a metal image. There's some debate as to whether it's 2 different images or one. It doesn't really matter. Basically, she's making things for an idolatrous shrine, which is what Micah is going to do with it. And so Micah takes this. He has made a shrine in his home. He makes an ephod and household gods. And he's got the carved image there as the focus of worship. And he ordains one of his sons as priest. Okay, a lot has happened there. And this is not a good look for Micah. And it is not an accident that verse 6 says, what does verse 6 say?
Everybody did what was right in their own eyes.
Wow, yeah, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. That has no connection to this story whatsoever, right? So Micah is, like, any Jew who's reading this should be screaming and saying, "Micah, what are you doing? You have broken so many commandments in this very short story so far." And as if by explanation, the writer of the book of Judges is saying, in those days, people did what they wanted. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did whatever he thought was best. And that's exactly what Micah is doing here. He's made this idol. He's ordained his son as a priest because it seemed good to him. He wasn't concerned about the covenant with Yahweh. He wasn't concerned about right and wrong. He was concerned with what seemed good to his eyes. Let's see here. That was question 2. Okay. Question number 3, what does Micah then do? Or who, maybe let's back up a little bit, who is introduced into this story now?
Levite.
A Levite. Okay. So a Levite enters the scene. He is a young man who is a Levite, but he's been living in Bethlehem in Judah. Interestingly, it might not draw this connection immediately, but if you connect some of the dots here and look later in chapter 18 about what family he's a part of, and then go back and see where that family was supposed to be, he wasn't supposed to be in Judah. He was supposed to be in one of 10 towns in Ephraim, Dan, or Manasseh. You remember that when the inheritance was given out to the different tribes, that the Levites were scattered out across the land because they needed to provide spiritual service and leadership for the entire nation. They couldn't just be in one spot. We talked about that in Joshua. And he was supposed to, we don't know exactly which county he was supposed to be in, but one of those in Ephraim, Dan, or Manasseh, and none of those sound like Judah to me, so what's he doing in Judah? Anyone have any ideas as to why he might have been living in Judah?
Well, the Levites were supposed to be supported by the people,
Mm-hmm.
and they obviously weren't doing that, so he was probably trying to make a living.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable assumption because we see this said more explicitly in other places in Israel's history as well, that when their idolatrous worship got really, really bad, a lot of times they stopped worshiping Yahweh, and when they stopped worshiping Yahweh, they're not really giving the tithes that they're supposed to in support of the priests and Levites. And so those priests and Levites often had to leave the service of the Lord and go, work out in the fields, go do things to support themselves. Or sometimes they ended up in an arrangement like it's going to happen here, where they're being supported in a priestly duty, but not really the priestly duty that they're supposed to be doing. So we do get a sense that this young man is wandering. He has wandered from his home to Judah, and now he has wandered back to Ephraim to kind of come to Micah's house. He's wandering for some reason, whether it's specifically that he's not adequately being supported and so he's needing to wander, or whether you just want to pull it back to verse 6, everyone did what was right in his own eyes. He doesn't care about where he's supposed to be. It doesn't matter. The point being is he's in the wrong place and it's about to get worse. So the Levite comes to Micah, and Micah starts asking him some questions. Where did you come from? And kind of why are you here? What's your story? And he says, I'm going to sojourn where I may find a place. So he's not really traveling with a destination in mind. He's looking for a place that he is able to settle down, which I think lends credence to what Kay was talking about there, that he's not being adequately supported. He's trying to find somewhere that he can establish himself, have some financial support, have some sort of job, doing whatever it is that he needs to do. And Micah makes him an offer. What's the offer?
Well, first, just backtrack a second. Micah had all the trappings of a shrine and all that stuff. He made himself an ephod. So now he sees this as a chance to legitimize that fake idolatrous shrine
Yes.
by getting a Levite priest in to make it the real deal, So
Yeah.
that's why he consecrated this guy to be a priest, which meant nothing.
Yeah.
Now, the question I have, I think is an important one. who is supposed to know the word of God?
Yeah,
The Levite.
absolutely.
Was he following the word of God? No. He aligned himself, allowed himself to be aligned with Micah in this idolatrous situation. And he's as bad as Micah, in my opinion, or worse, because he's supposed to know the word of God.
Yeah,
It wasn't just about him traveling around and getting support. It was that, but
yeah,
it was mostly about him in the service, separated for the service of God, which he failed miserably at.
yes,
And it's sad because here you see, this is so, to me, it's so like today. People set up these churches and stuff, teach false things. They look, they smell like a place of faith, but they're not.
Yeah.
You start getting into it, you know. So it's very interesting that this has been going on since the beginning of everything.
yes, yes. Thank you for that point, because, yeah, don't get the idea that the Levite is an innocent victim here. Yeah, he is absolutely not. He is an opportunist, and he is breaking the covenant himself. He absolutely knows better, and he is going to lead Micah astray, lead other people astray as the story goes on. He does not come off looking very good in this. Nobody does. Nobody in this story comes off looking good. We'll just get that out of the way right from the start. Everyone involved in these chapters is making some very serious errors, and that's indicative of what's going on in Israel as a whole. So, yeah, as Dave alluded to, Micah wants to legitimize his shrine that he has made. He had ordained his son as a priest, and that's great, but there's something about having a real Levite as a priest that apparently is important to him. Now, he knows that the Levites are the ones who are supposed to be the priests. He is trained as such. We can make this shrine even more legitimate, even more useful and honorable by getting the Levite to be our supported priest. And evidently, Micah's family has some money. Remember, he was able to steal 1,100 pieces of silver from his mother. They've got some money. So he has the capability to support a priest in his home if he wants to. And the offer he makes to him is very interesting. Stay with me and be to me a father and a priest, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year and a suit of clothes and your living. It's a lot of weird things about that. Yeah, Steve.
I was just kind of curious why we call him father if he's just a kid.
Yeah, very good question. So we have noted that the Levite is a young man. We don't know how old Micah was. Young enough for his mother to still be living, but that doesn't necessarily narrow it down too much. He's got a home established, and he has a son that he's able to ordain as a priest. So he's, his son is old enough to serve in that kind of role. So he's got to be older than this Levite, it seems like. And he's saying, be to me a father and a priest. Mark, what do you got to say about that?
This seems to be a position of power is what they're looking for, including this young man. And he's telling this young man he'll have that power.
Yeah.
And when you get to chapter 21, they are still doing their festivals, at least one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And his mom petitions God himself. This idol is supposed to represent Jehovah the way I'm seeing it. So he's, they're, in my mind, their thinking is the power will be here in our house. And this is their approach to this whole thing.
Right. We've appealed to Yahweh. We've made this carved image. We're getting this real Levite priest. Yeah, it seems like it's possible that this carved image is supposed to represent Yahweh. That's somewhat unclear to me, but she is appealing very specifically to God, so I'm not sure who else it would be if it's not. Regardless, you're not supposed to represent Yahweh with a carved image. That is pretty explicit in the covenant. They should know better. Lauren?
As I read through this, I kept the passage talking about, Lord, Lord, how have I done many wonderful works in your name and all this. And apart from me, that kept screaming in the back of my head.
Yes, Micah has accomplished some wonderful things here, and the Levite as well, but none of it is pleasing to God. So yeah, I think the idea behind saying, "Be to me a father and a priest," is, as Mark's saying you're going to have some power and honor and respect. Think about what that sounds like to a young man who's been traveling from place to place, looking for somewhere to settle down. Think about, how much that's buttering him up, really. I'm a wealthy man, a wealthy older man than you, and I want you to be my spiritual guide, to be my spiritual father, and to lead me in the way that I should go. It's very, just a lot of buttering him up in this and giving him a lot to try to convince him to be there. So be to me a father and a priest, and then the 10 pieces of silver a year, his clothing, and it says and his living. So, his room and board as well, right? So the 10 pieces of silver, he's not even needing to use to support himself that much, at least with his basic needs. Those are going to be provided as well. So this is a pretty attractive offer. This man is away from his home, away from his community where he would have roots, and he's going to have to struggle to get by if he can't find something. And even if he can find something, it will probably still be a struggle. He's being offered something very attractive here, and he takes it. The Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons, which is not really a contradiction of the be a father to me. Obviously, he wasn't going to be his physical father, but he's treating him like family, and he is a part of that household now as an honored member of the family. So Micah has ordained the Levite, and the young man became his priest and was in the house of Micah. As Dave mentioned, Micah has no authority to ordain a priest, so this means absolutely nothing. You can say anything you want. You can ordain anybody you like. It doesn't mean that God recognizes him as a legitimate priest or as one who is really pleasing God in any way. But, Micah has done this. Like he ordained his son, he's now ordaining this young Levite. And Micah says, verse 13, "Now I know that the Lord will prosper me, because I have a Levite as priest." Good for you, Micah. You know a lot of things, don't you? He's so sure of himself. He is not concerned in the slightest that this is not what God has commanded. He has not asked God about any of this. He has not gone to the law to see the proper procedures and the laws. He doesn't care about any of that. He knows that God will bless him because, well, why wouldn't he? I've got a Levite as a priest. I'm doing a good thing here by being able to have this shrine and have this carved image and to support this priest in my home. Okay?
This is pretty early on. It's not that far from their settling in the land.
Right.
And he is a descendant, I guess, of Moses,
Mm-hmm.
like a third generation or something. So this is not very far into what they're doing, and they should remember this covenant they made and everything.
They should absolutely know better. He is a descendant of Moses. We know that from his family, but he is not embodying much of anything that Moses did. At least the Levite is a descendant of Moses. I'm not sure about Micah wouldn't have been, but the Levite was. The Levite is not leading spiritually in any good way here. This is not something that he should have accepted. He should have rebuked Micah for this and told him, this is not proper. Your whole shrine is not proper. You'll also remember that this is up in Ephraim, and at this time, the tabernacle was in Shiloh, which is in Ephraim and not that far away from where they were. So it's not like, oh, we're so far away from the tabernacle that, we've got to come up with some other place to worship. It's right there. But it doesn't matter because it was never about the physical distance or convenience or any of that. It's about Micah building up this kind of honorable thing for himself, so he believes, and the Levite getting what he wants in honor and money. So question number, oh yeah, Dave.
I tell you, something just jumps out in the end for everybody. But, this is something that I believe that each of us as Christians should be very, very observant of and careful of. Because what is Micah trying to do, really? We've gone through all the things that he's done, but what is he really trying to do? I think what he's really trying to do is buy his relationship with God by committing sin. In other words, doing a bunch of simple stuff for the outcome of pleasing God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's really what he did here. And that's ludicrous. I mean, most of us know that's just insanity. And you see this typical fall to sin, the lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, whatever, life, this Levite. And so it's a terribly strong message, in my opinion, to us.
Yeah.
Corruption, you can't say, oh, I can do part of God's word when I feel like doing it, or until it's getting to things I want. That's not good. Or I can corrupt the word of God ever.
Yeah.
And still expect the right outcome from
Yeah.
God. I find it just disturbing that, but yet I understand that that's what happens to us.
Yeah.
When we get seduced by things. And I just wanted to point that out because it's no new thing. It's just that something we need to be reminded of every day because it can very easily.
Yeah, absolutely. The corruption happening here, the kind of seductive appeal of, for Micah of having this power and prestige as a man with a shrine and a priest and, a real Levite to be his priest. All of this is, as I think Mark was dead on as well, he said, trying to bring that power into his home and into his family as, he is the channel of God's power here. And that is very appealing to Micah, and he has enough money to buy a Levite, basically, and to get him to go along with him. But none of that has made it pleasing to God. And none of that is going to take away from the atrocity that is being committed here. Okay.
They don't have a copy of the law. They don't have anything to read as a rule. So that's why 3 times a year the men were all to go and gather and have a festival and hear the word read, because otherwise they didn't know the law.
Yeah.
They didn't have any copy of it.
Yeah. And that's why you had the Levites spread throughout as well, because they were trained to know the law and to know the right way to worship God. They're trained to be able to lead the people spiritually. So if, and this is a very strong speculation, so I don't think it's going to be true anyway, but even if you wanted to argue that Micah did not know better, now when the Levite is involved, the Levi absolutely does know better. Now, I think that's far too rosy of a picture here to say that Micah didn't know better. He should have known better as well. Every family, every person throughout the land was expected to know. That's why they were to gather and to read the law. That's why they were to pass these things on from parent to child, to talk about it in their families, to have it be enough of a recurring topic of conversation that it was on the forefront of their minds.
Well, Micah knew enough to know that, or to believe that having a Levite there would
Yeah.
legitimize what
Right.
he was doing. So there was some knowledge, and the knowledge hasn't passed completely from the people.
Right.
They maybe have twisted it to their own form of what they wanted, but it was still there.
Yeah.
For him to know that having, the Levite was someone who could definitely serve us.
Yeah. What we're seeing them do is blend the covenant that Yahweh made with them with the way that the peoples around them and among them were worshiping their gods. That's all they've done. They've created a blend of the two. And it looks very strange to us because our cultural blend would not be to have a carved image and to establish a shrine in a home and ordain a Levite as priest that way. But it's the same sort of thing that we struggle with, of untangling our cultural norms from what our service to God is supposed to be. That we're to worship God the way He commands, not the way that everybody around us is doing. Gary, you had your hand up before, didn't you?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, every verse 6, everyone doing what's right in their own eyes.
Yeah.
Describes most people in the world.
Yes. It does, and it's the battle that we have, because to go against what is right in your own eyes is a hard thing to do. You have to care about what is right in God's eyes, and then you have to change what is right in your eyes to where that lines up with what God actually wants. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of transformation that needs to happen. We instinctively do what is right in our own eyes. Even small children do what is right in their own eyes. They see something they want, they go and get it. Something comes to mind, that's what they do. That is our state as well, unless we are transformed and molded to do something different. And here they know better, and they're rejecting God and going against His will. So, question number 4, what is reminded to the reader again, chapter 18, verse 1? There's no king in Israel. And you're kind of meant to fill in the second half of it, even though it's not worded there. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Because as you're reading through this, you can't help but think, what are they doing and why are they doing it? Well, it's what was right in their eyes. So in chapter 18, we see the Danites come to Micah's house, people of Dan. You'll remember that they were not successful in taking the land that was supposed to be theirs. And so at this point, they do not actually have any inheritance. Like, God has given them an inheritance, but they've not gone and actually taken that land. And they're looking for a different land. So they were supposed to be out in the west. They're going to end up in the north. And so the location of that tribe will be totally different than what God intended it to be. And the men of Dan come, and they're by the house of Micah. They recognize the voice of the Levite, which I doubt means that they knew him personally. I think it's probably that they recognized an accent and knew that he was not from around here, because the questions they ask were, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is your business here? Those aren't questions you ask of somebody if you think that they're from there. You think they're from somewhere else. And so the Levite tells them, the story of how he ended up in Micah's house and the role that he has to play there. And they ask him, inquire of God that we may know whether the journey on which we're setting out will succeed. And the Levite, just as bold as Micah was, and Micah just knowing that God was happy with him, the Levite is just as bold as that and says, of course God is happy with you. Go in peace. The journey you're on is under the eye of the Lord. No, that's absolutely not true. God does not condone what's going to happen here, but that hasn't stopped them before. Why would it stop them now? And they end up finding the town of Laish. And Laish is way up in the north. It's isolated away from any of their natural allies. They don't really have anybody who's there to protect them, but it's a good place. They possess wealth, and they're unsuspecting. They're able to be attacked without much consequence. And so the people of Dan basically go in and slaughter the people of Laish. They burn the city to the ground, and they rebuild it, and they name that town Dan. And this is where they make their tribe from here. They become the northernmost tribe of Dan, of the people of Israel. But it took the wholesale slaughter of a people that God did not tell them to go fight. This was not the covenant war that we saw in Joshua, where God was judging these peoples. This is Dan just saying, those people can't fight back. Let's go kill them. This is slaughter. This is not something approved of by God, yet they've done it anyway, and they've made themselves a town. Just extremely briefly here, the Danites, as they're leaving, they make the Levite a better offer. They say, you can be the priest for this one man, Micah, or you can be a priest for a whole people. Basically, we can offer you more money and more honor and more prestige, so come with us. And the Levite, ever the opportunist, says, sure, I'll go with you. He's not an innocent party in all of this. He is hopping from better situation to better situation, free to malign the name of God, indirectly and directly. And he becomes a priest for the people of Dan, which is not the way that this was supposed to be anyway. Micah did try to stop him, but he couldn't fight against all these people of Dan, so they're able to intimidate him and to send him packing. And that's the story of Micah and the Levite. So, yeah, Mark?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you keep talking about not having a king, and it just really shows that they had fallen from a God-centric nation, like
Right.
you've stated so many times, to God is whatever you make it in your own mind and however you want to do it.
Yeah.
And they just made God a very trite thing, which throughout all Deuteronomy and
Yeah.
all the previous books of that, he was talking against, speaking against, and they just did it.
Every step along the way in these two chapters, they're going against what God wants them to do. Like, nothing here happens in the right way. Levi's not where he's supposed to be. Micah's not worshiping the right way. You got the wrong priest involved here. Dan's going to the wrong place. They slaughter innocent people. They build up their tribe in the wrong place. Now the Levites becoming... none of this is proper. None of this is right. Truly, in those days, everyone did what was right in his own eyes. That's the message here. And it will somehow get worse in the last lesson that we have with the next story of a new Levite. So we'll do that next week. Thank y'all.